Sharansky Danziger, and I'm very happy to be here with my father, Natan Sharansky, to talk about Pesach and Haggadah Shel Pesach.
Shalom. I am father of Rachel Danziger Sharansky, and I am always glad to give some advice to my daughter.
Thank you, Abba. Today, we're going to talk about the topic of community and togetherness. And for many, many families in the Jewish world, the Leila Seder, the night of the Seder, is an opportunity to experience familial togetherness, even for people who live far away from their families, who disagree with their families, who fight with their families, who hold grudges against their families. For many, many people, this is the time when they get together, regardless of all of that. And that ability to get together, no matter what, complicated things lie underneath the surface, is actually acknowledged in the text of the Haggadah itself, in the very, very famous passage about the 4 sons, which goes as follows: כנגד 4 בנים דיברה תורה, אחד חכם, ואחד רשע, ואחד תם, ואחד שאינו יודע לשאול. Corresponding to 4 children did the Torah speak, one wise, one rebellious, one simple, and one who does not know how to ask. And what the Haggadah does in this text is to acknowledge that each of these 4 children, 4 sons, is different. Their personality is different, their opinions are different, their needs are different. And while we all gather together at the table of Seder to fulfill the very basic and important commandment of you shall tell your son, right, passing down the story, there's an acknowledgement that you can't pass the story in the same way to everybody. Different people have different needs, ask different questions, and the answers they receive need to be different accordingly. And the truth is, it's very moving because it acknowledges that we're not all the same, and maybe even more importantly, that we all have a place at the table. Even the rebellious son, who we kind of tell off, his question is, as we hear, מה העבודה הזאת לכם, לכם ולא לו? What is this worship to you, and not to him or her? Meaning he's pushing against the weight of the commandments, the weight of Jewish tradition, the weight of Jewish identity. We still include him, we still talk to him, we still answer his question in a way that's meant to teach him something. And this is a beautiful model. For many people, it works on the familial level, right? Despite their differences, they come together in Leila Seder and they sit together and experience something together, acknowledging and making room for all the different people in the family. But once you take a step back and look on the national level, it's much, much harder. We live in a very difficult time for the Jewish people, both in Israel and outside of Israel. We disagree about many things ferociously. Here in Israel, we are fighting about the judicial reform. We're fighting about Chok HaGiyus, the law of draft for ultra-Orthodox members of Israeli society. Outside of Israel, we have other problems. Between Israeli Jewry and diaspora Jewry, there's many disagreements. And these disagreements are real. I recently saw a sticker outside that said, our disagreements are imagined or made up. The love is real. And I was like, okay, the love is real, that's true. The disagreements are not imagined. They're about real things that affect all of us, and at some of them we can't compromise. And the question is, how do we handle that? How can our togetherness survive this? And what I want to do today is to try and see what the Haggadah and what your experiences and our experiences here now can offer us as guidance to try and make sense of this togetherness, to try and stay one community, even when we disagree.
You started from this picture of 4 sons. Rabbi Weiss, you're keeping his Haggadah. Rabbi Weiss was one of the central figures in the struggle for Soviet Jewry. He, together with Rav Lukstein and many others, mobilized all their communities and many of their followers for the struggle. He taught me, I think he's writing it in Haggadah, that 4 sons infected 4 generations. And he explained, with American Jewry, there was a generation of tzaddikim,
righteous
writers who came from shtetl, and then there was a generation of those who were rebellious against the shtetl. We are now in America. And then those who were naive, simple, and those who even didn't know how to ask. And then the circle goes again. So let's take it. I liked it, and as you know, I use it in many times in our Seder Pesach. But let's move from the experience of American families to our families from the former Soviet Union. My
Great.
great-grandfather, Natan, he was really Talmid Chacham. His life was in the yeshiva. And as my grandfather remembers, when he was 4 or 5 years old, his father was keeping him between his legs in the synagogue in order he will not lose even one word of the prayer. So naturally, my grandfather was already less eager to stay all the time in yeshiva. He went to business. He made sure that his children, including my father, will be studying in Еврейская гимназия Odessa. It's like business school for Jews in Odessa. And one of his sons then became Zionist. Another son, my father, became communist for some time. And then he was, of course, very disappointed. And he didn't know what to ask. And then there came the generation of your parents. And clearly we went back to our roots. If you take on mother's side, your mother's, your grandfather was Hasid from Alexander, Hasid Alexandrov. We don't know a lot because almost all the family was killed in Shoah.
The Holocaust.
The Holocaust. Her father was mobilized by Red Army and became a fighter and a communist. For him, it was a real tragedy what happened with his children who revolted and went back to Israel and Chazruba Tshuva.
Became back to their Jewish identity.
Back to Jewish identity in full meaning of this word, in all aspects of this word. And it was very painful. But when we discuss all what happened in the last 3, 4, 5 generations, we show a lot of understanding, a lot of even love, feelings of family. We look what they gave us, in spite of all the differences, of the awful struggles which we had between the generations. And what are the things which we got from them and we want to pass to our children. So if we show so much understanding to our families in the previous generations, how we can not show the same understanding to different people living in one generation, but who are part of our national family. After all, every family has its own cycle of the changes, and it so happened that in our generation there are those who are belonging to different tribes of the 4 sons. So it has, when we are thinking about the changes between the generations in our own family, and accept it and understand it, it has to help us to understand why we have to accept as our family all those who live together with us, who want to continue their march of Jewish people through the centuries, and who disagree with us.
If I understand correctly, you're putting the emphasis here on understanding and empathy. You're saying, for example, if I can think about my grandfathers, my mother, father, Simeon, and remember that he didn't tell my mom that she's Jewish until she found out when she was 14, that he didn't want her to be Jewish, that he didn't want her to go to Israel, that the one time he met you, he fought with you and said, I would prefer to see my children in prison than to see them go to Israel with you. I don't have to be angry at him. I can understand where he came from, that he lost everything in the Holocaust and he blamed his Jewish identity for it, and he wanted to protect his children. He was a father trying to protect his children under a dictatorship, in a world rampant with anti-Semitism, and he was doing his best. You're saying that if I can focus on understanding him and therefore accepting him with all his differences, there's no reason I can't apply the same to people who are not part of my immediate family, but are part of my national family.
Yes, it's true. Really, we had very different experience with my father and with Avital's, your mother's father. On my side, there was a lot of fear, but a lot of understanding and sympathy and love and fighting together. There, on the other side, there was shock, surprise, anger.
You mean he was shocked and angry when
He,
his children became
the
Zionists?
parents of Avital and her brother Mikhail were shocked, were surprised, were fearful, were angry, but in the end, they were looking for the ways to rebuild their bridges with the children. And those false ideologies fell apart and disappeared, but the real love, desire of love, of understanding, of connection with the children, and especially with grandchildren, stayed. It was not fulfilled, but it was there. And so when we are thinking about them, we are thinking about what makes us as one family. We are trying to understand, even if we disagree, and we have such difficult memories sometimes, but we do understand we are family, and we have to understand how we were connected, and what from what they gave us, we have to pass to the future generations. So it is very important then to take this feeling of the family and understanding and to move it to the people who live together with us simultaneously from different tribes of 4 brothers.
So again, you're talking about understanding, empathy, accepting the differences, focusing on what unites us even when we accept the differences. But the truth is that growing up, you always also said that differences of opinion can become an advantage, meaning that it's not just something that we can be understanding and sympathetic to, we can also benefit from it. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, of course, it can be a benefit. And the best examples that I think about my school is, or my understanding is coming from the struggle for Soviet Jewry. It seems to many that it was like one big unifying everybody movement to bring down the Iron Curtain. Jews from the Soviet Union who discovered their identity, and Jews from America who rediscovered their identity, and with Israel in the middle, one big struggle. It wasn't the case. There were, as always in Jewish movement, there was many different organizations who had very serious differences, whether we are fighting for Jewish identity or for immigration, whether it is aliyah or immigration, whether policy should be quiet and secret or the struggle should be open, and so on and so on. And I'll give you 2 examples. One is relations between activists and Jewish establishment.
In the States.
Now let's speak about the States, because it is by far the biggest group of Jews of diaspora who support us. And so there was permanent tension, because Jewish activists felt that establishment, they are cowards. They are not ready to speak and fight publicly. They are not ready to challenge their own government. They say, well, we are guests in this country. Can we really speak against the international policy of the United States of America in order to present Jewish case? And then the first demonstration in our struggle was on the 1st of May, 1964, when first students from Columbia University organized the first demonstration of solidarity with Soviet Jews. That opened the new page. And then, of course, there were many organizations, and establishment was involved fully in the struggle. And 23 years later, we have the final battle of these American Jews for their Soviet brothers. Because 23 years later, in December of 1987, new president, the leader of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, is coming to Washington. And the year before, I, who was just released from prison, some other activists, appealed to American Jews, saying that let's hundreds of thousands of American Jews come to Washington when Gorbachev was there. And establishment was very cautious about it. They raised questions. They said there is no way to bring hundreds of thousands of Jews in winter to Washington. It's not New York. 18,000, that's maximum what we can do. Why you're encouraging failure? And what will Reagan say? And what will Gorbachev say? Just now there is hope for peace, for detente, for building bridges, and we Jews will be the only who are breaking this atmosphere. And then, without entering the debate, you simply go to the activists. I visited 32 different universities in the months before. And practically in every university, all the young people, all the Jewish activist organizations are supporting this idea. They like this idea. They they make lists of those who will go to the buses from Harvard, from Yale, before you're finishing your speech. And at some moment, establishment enters the game. Like already 3 or 4 or 5 weeks are left. What you can do, how you can organize such a demonstration. At the moment Jewish organizations, established Jewish organizations, decide that we are doing it, then millions of dollars are coming, then hundreds of airplanes are rented, thousands and thousands of buses, unbelievable logistic operation, how to bring these 250,000 Jews to Washington for a few hours, and then take them back from Los Angeles to Toronto. And it was a huge success. But as my wife, Avital, your mother, was teaching me when I went out of the prison, and she was sharing with me experience of her struggle, she was saying, always start from the activists, our students and housewives, as KGB defined our army. But you will know that you succeeded when establishment will adopt your idea, will lead this idea, and will take all the credit. Then you know that we have won. And that's exactly how it worked. Activists who believed that these establishment organizations are too shy, are cowards, will do nothing, and establishment who believed that they're irresponsible anarchists, they all needed one another in order to succeed. And they succeeded only together.
You're saying that when there's a shared goal, sometimes you need the people who hold the opposite opinion to achieve it.
Absolutely. Well, now that is like universal example of the tension between activists and establishment, which exists practically everywhere in every society, in every country, in every serious struggle. But here is very specific, only Jewish, only Israeli experience. What is we have mutual aim to open the gates of the Soviet Union. But what is the aim behind it? Is it aliyah or is it freedom of immigration? Do we want people to go back to their roots, to their history, to Israel? Or do we want them to give an opportunity to them to decide where they will live? And it so happened that in the beginning, of course, it was aliyah to Israel, because first of all, in the Soviet Union, there was no law which permits immigration. There was only one hole, it's reunification of families. And Israel succeeded to give to every Jew who wanted special invitation from his or her family, whether real or fiction, it doesn't matter, and to start the process. And Israel was in the middle of it through all these years, before it started and all the time. Yeah. And Israel is the one who was organizing the first messengers, different Jews from different countries to visit Soviet Jews to find out what's happening, and so on and so on. So Israel felt seriously that this belongs to them, to us. And then Soviet Jews, in the beginning, those who got permission, was going to Israel. But at some moment, some of them understood that after all, the moment we are crossing the border, we are free to make the choice. And more start saying, well, we really want to go to America or to some other country. And the moment they are saying it, technically, it's now not Jewish agency which is responsible for them. It's HIAS, Special Jewish American Organization responsible for immigration of Jews for the last 100 years. And HIAS takes these Jews from Vienna to Rome, and then start the process of them coming to America as the refugees. And I have to say that the moment, there was a special name for this phenomenon, Neshira, dropouts, yes. And the moment this number of dropouts became more and more significant and reached big percentage of the Aliyah, Israel was furious. No, people in Israel who were responsible for Aliyah were absolutely furious. Our minister of absorption once said that that's like a plot of diaspora. Israel appealed to American Jews to stop using their influence to open the gates of America. To the contrary, to ask from American government to close their gates for Soviet Jews who were supposed to come to Israel, and they're getting the status of refugees. What kind of refugees they are? There is the state of Israel. And American Jews could not do it. They said, well, but we came to America as refugees. Now our grandchildren or grandchildren of our friends want to come, and we'll ask American government to close the gates. The problem was also not only between Israel and American Jewry. Jews in Moscow, many Jews in Moscow felt very strongly that all our Zionist struggle, all our singing Shalach et Ami, let our people go, and go back to our roots, our country. Now you're making mockery from this. There was a letter of prisoners of Zion. You have to understand, to get letter from one prisoner of Zion, which is public protest, is almost impossible. And he was collective letter from 10 or 12, I don't remember, but very respectable names, those for whom American Jewry is fighting, who were writing from the prison that it was not the aim of our struggle. Our aim was to reunite with our people in Israel. Don't lend assistance to those who are twisting it and going to America.
We're familiar a little bit with that rhetoric now, when there are people who fought in the war here or who lost loved ones in the war and say, we didn't fight for this, we didn't fight for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there were also some almost anecdotal situations. I was one of those few Jews who wrote a letter to Israel and wrote that we are Zionists. We are dreaming to build our home in Israel, but we are against the idea that Israel will be closing any gates for the Jews, because then it will be analogy with those countries which are closing doors for the Jews and not opening. That Israel, we want to do everything to attract Jews to Israel, but not to force them to go to Israel. You know, some very good Jews in Israel who were responsible for absorption called me and said, you think you can do things like this against Zionism and it will go you for free? When you come to Israel, we will not send you to the center of absorption, Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem. They were most popular places. We'll send you to the center of absorption to Arad, because Arad was just new small town in Negev and it looked like exile. So before I was threatened with exile in Siberia, I got the threat. So you can laugh at this, but the crisis was really very serious. Passions went very high. And in some moment, really for a short period of time, in some conversations among ourselves and on the telephone with Israel, there was discussion, maybe if it is so difficult to make it compatible, to have two different movements. One will be movement for Aliyah, another will be movement for free immigration. They will be appealing to different organizations. Well, everything will be open and fair. But you know, this idea fell almost immediately, because the moment people start thinking seriously, they understand this movement cannot get any power, any energy, any readiness of people to sacrifice their lives if it is not the movement for going back for 2,000 years and coming. Ani rak chazer, it was the song, popular song among ourselves. I'm only coming back. It's so without this coming back, there is almost no energy. But without the principle of freedom of choice, human rights, you cannot build international case. You cannot use all these international agreements like we were using, Helsinki Agreement and the others, to mobilize practically every parliament in the world, every non-Jewish group who was concerned with human rights. You cannot have such a big public support if it is not a question of human rights. So it was, and then it was became clear that after all, we have one mutual aim: to break the Iron Curtain. And it is important that people will keep coming to this movement from different places. And then when we will defeat Soviet Union, then we can separate direct flights to Israel, direct flights to America, and as a result, more than 1 million Jews came to Israel, about 500,000 came to America, some tens of thousands went to Australia and some other places. So it was already normal situation. So that is the example for me, when two movements which hated one another, which hated the idea that there is another movement, it appears they needed one another very much, because after all, there was one aim which they could not reach without close cooperation.
It's interesting. So first of all, I have to say it's very encouraging for me, because in our fractured time, like many others, I look back to the time of Soviet Jewry, which was obviously before my time, but I grew up on stories. And I'm like, wow, we were so united then, and now we're so fractured, we're doomed. But just by normalizing differences of opinions, by showing us that there can be real differences and yet you can achieve mutual goals together, it's making me look at our own differences and fractures a little bit less catastrophically, let's put it this way. My question is, how do you apply it? You say that if there's a mutual goal, if there's a shared goal, we need everybody. And then when we see differences of opinion, instead of seeing it as a disadvantage, we should see it as an opportunity or as an asset to the shared goal. How do you apply it for fractures today? For example, for the struggle in Israel surrounding the judicial reform.
Well, the problem with judicial reform is not the position of one another politician. That's the problem of the dynamics. It goes immediately to the extremes. Or people who insist that it has to be imposed on the country immediately, fully. In 2-3 months, we'll have very different set of relations between the government and the court. Or it has to be cancelled immediately. Immediately, because it's such a non-starter, such a dangerous thing, we have to stop it immediately. Well, of course, there are other voices, other opinions, maybe even majority of people who don't feel themselves belonging to one another extreme. But it's not what is heard. When I was trying in the beginning to speak to some journalists, the moment they realized that I'm going again to speak to them on one hand, on the other hand, they were losing all the interest. The situation is too hot. You have to take a side. If you are not, in fact, if there was one phrase which united everybody, was, if you are not with us, you're a traitor. You support dictatorship. So on one side and on the other, they believed that if you are not with us, you support dictatorship. And when I was trying to say that, but even if this reform will be implemented fully, which I don't agree, I think there are some problematic points, but we will not be dictatorship. Or even if nothing from this reform will be implemented, but I am also against, because there are some things to be changed. It will not be dictatorship. Stop talking about dictatorship. It was in this atmosphere, it becomes almost impossible. And the way out of it there is no other way, is to remind ourselves what is our mutual goal, about what we can agree. We all agree that we need our Jewish democratic state. And then you start thinking what it means, what you can take from the other side. And you understand that after all, you really don't want the state without the courts, without judges. All these phrases, we were elected and not judges, why they should decide. It's only a nice phrase, but in fact, somebody has to defend human rights of individual or minority, and that's the function of the court. On the other hand, do you really want the state without rule of the majority? Then you don't need the election. Then there is no democracy. So there must be rule of majority. So government is real. It has to have a real power. The moment you start thinking in these terms, so you understand we cannot speak about full victory over the enemy. You have to think about what kinds of compromises we are ready to do together.
So you're saying in the sense that you want to apply the same rubric you applied when you talked about the past in the Soviet Union here and say, we have a shared goal, like we say in our international anthem, like Liot Am Chofshi Be'artzenu, right, to be a free nation in our country, Jewish and democratic. And in order to achieve that, we need a certain balance between all these different parts, the different factions within the Israeli public support. So we actually need all those different people. We need all those different positions, because if we remove one of those poles, the pole of the court, the pole of the rule of the majority, we're not going to be able to achieve our goal. But when you explain it to people like that, do they listen? Do they understand that?
Well, frankly, at the year of elections, it's very difficult to make people think in terms of compromise. The year of elections, it's much easier to go to the extreme. And that is the problem.
I wonder if part of the problem is that the way you're describing it is very, very cerebral. It's like if you're an uber rational person who spent some time in prison surviving by being uber rational and trained himself to be uber rational, you can kind of disconnect from your passions and emotions and the strength with which you hold your personal beliefs and say, okay, these are my beliefs, these are their beliefs. We actually need both of them to achieve our mutual goal. Let's keep going together. Most of us are not chess players. We don't manage the world so strategically, so to speak.
Well, unfortunately, you're not a chess player.
But I lay the blame at your feet. When I was 5 and you were teaching me, you kept saying, like, don't you see that if you do this in 5 moves, I'll win? So it was a little bit much for me. But we can leave that squabble for other conversations. And I'll just say that I think that while I appreciate the perspective and the important emphasis you put on understanding the need for different camps to collaborate on achieving mutual goals, maybe we can add another perspective that is less cerebral and speaks more to our emotions. And I think the Haggadah does exactly that. And the Haggadah does it in the text that we say at the very beginning of the part of the Leila Seder, of the night of the Seder, when we start telling the story, at the beginning of the Magid. Before we start telling a story, before we go into all the details, we say the following. This is the bread of affliction that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Anyone who is famished should come and eat. Anyone who is in need should come and share the Pesach meal. Now we are here. Next year we will be hopefully in the land of Israel. This year we are slaves. Next year we will hopefully be free people. So what do we do here? We hold the bread of affliction. We say this is the bread of our shared past and of our shared hope. And our hope is to be free and in Israel, democratic and Jewish, like you said, right? But before we go into the details of what this hope entails and what this Jewish democratic life will look like, which the second we go there, we'll find we disagree. And before we go into the details of our history and how we understand and interpret it, which the second we'll go there, we'll start disagreeing. Again, our disagreements will come to the surface. First of all, we're focused on giving. Anyone who's hungry, anyone who's in need, come and eat. I am willing to share with you. And I think that this is not just a technicality or here we are starting the ceremony. I think this is a deep psychological insight, because it says, in order to be one people, focus first on what you can give and later talk about the things that come to the realm of opinions, where we agree or disagree and fight it out with each other. And I understood the significance of that through personal experience. Because after the beautiful six, as Rachel Goldberg Poland calls them, were murdered in a tunnel in Gaza, members of Kehilat Akel, the shul that the Goldberg Polans daven at, started a prayer vigil that gathered in a particular crossroad in Jerusalem every Shabbat after services for an hour. And the idea of this prayer vigil for the hostages was that it was apolitical, that this was a place where people who went every week to demonstrations against the government, saying your policy regarding the hostages is not good enough, and people who would refuse to go to those same demonstrations could come together and set the politics aside, set their differences of opinion about how exactly we should fight for the hostages aside, and just focus on being together, on praying together, singing together, yearning, really, for the return of the hostages together. And the first few weeks of attending the vigil were difficult for me, because even though it was supposed to be apolitical, in every meeting, in every gathering, there's a speaker. And the speaker shared his or her opinion, and oftentimes the opinions were not my own. And in fact, there are opinions I disagreed with strongly. And I found myself fidgeting in place, thinking, how does it reflect on me if I stand here listening to this? Can I even be here and give silent support to this opinion? How do I feel about this? What do I think about it? How can I refute it? How can I show my discomfort? Or should I show my discomfort? And then a few weeks in, I realized that I'm looking at it wrong. And I thought, instead of focusing on whether I agree or disagree with it, which is really irrelevant because it doesn't matter. We're not here to agree or disagree. This is not about cerebral things. This is not about opinions and principles. Let me focus on what I can give. I'm here to give something, my time, my patience, my listening, my voice when I was the speaker sharing my opinion, my prayer, joining my voice with other people's voices in song and in prayer, my heart, helping with organizing or cleaning up at the end when I could. The second I focus on what I can give, something shifted for me, because it turned out that the differences of opinions are not that important. What we share, the shared yearning for the hostages, shared care, the feeling of arvut, of solidarity, mattered so much more than how we understand this feeling should be translated into political action. And I'm still in touch. I'm friends with many women I met through the vigil. And with most of them, I still disagree about almost any big question that divides Israeli society right now. But I have faith in them. I have trust in them. I'm much more predisposed to listen to what they have to say instead of rejecting it outright, because we walked away together, because we shared something real with each other. And I think that maybe the Haggadah is telling us here, even before you go into the cerebral understanding that differences make us stronger, build those layers of your togetherness that are based on action, on giving, on sharing, and then you'll have resilience even in the face of disagreements.
Well, that's really interesting, because what you are saying is that even if people are very different, but want to feel one family, so they have to find something on what they agree and to cooperate. In this island of the agreement, they cooperate, and then they are much more open and accepting to those parts of their families with which they disagree. That's what. So I think political life, it's difficult, but I can find some examples. Maybe the most extreme is my relations with Yossi Sarid. If you remember, there was such an activist and then leader of Meretz, and at some moment, together with me, minister, we simply belonged. It seemed that we belonged to two different worlds. We both were Zionists, everybody in his or her in his own way, but we disagreed what is the value of Eretz Israel. We disagreed about Judaism, about the role of religion, whether religion is a very good thing or very bad thing. We fully disagreed. When he was speaking in the Knesset, I was not shouting only because I had a rule never shout, never to raise voice in Knesset, but unfortunately it was not the rule. So there was like a shouting match between him and people who disagree with him, with the awful words used one against the other. And here comes we are in the one, thanks got shortly leaving government of Ehud Barak. Then I'm very proud with the fact that I helped to bring it down. But there was 1 year when he is Minister of Education and I'm Interior Minister, two very important positions in this government. And we find out that there is a topic in which we are both very interested. And for practically all the other ministers, it's not a priority. It's not a topic they want to discuss. It's not of interest. And then the topic of human rights, whether we are talking about the human rights and the connection or democracy and peace process, which was like my topic, or whether equality of minorities inside Israel. We found out that we can normally, in a civil way, to discuss it and even make some decisions. That's how we made very important decision about accessibility of schools among different minorities, like that children of Druze or children of Bedouins don't have to go 5 miles to their schools. And some other questions, which may be not so big, but first of all, they were important for the society. They were dependent on two ministers, and we were willing to cooperate. In the end, the government fell apart. He went through left door, I went through right door. But this feeling of understanding and cooperation we took for years ahead. And I have to say that I was very proud of my daughter, of you, when you, together with Tzvi Zussman, the father of the fallen soldier, organized a small demonstration, but very powerful. Different opinions, one heart, which really gave opportunity to people with different opinions come and participate. Kol hakavod.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a significant event for me as well. It was an opportunity for people who held different opinions about the question of the hostages and how to release them to come together and pray together. And we needed all the togetherness we could get. To try and kind of put everything you said and I said and we shared together in perspective here, so far we touched 3 different ways to handle the differences between us. One is an emphasis on understanding and empathy. This is what you brought up when we talked about the 4 sons. One is to understand that the differences between us serve us as we strive toward the goal, which is you shared from your experience with the start of Passover Seder and here in Israel. And the last is the focus on building bonds within our community that go deeper than opinions and give us better abilities to be empathetic, understanding, thoughtful, maybe even cerebral and rational when dealing with these opinions. I want to wrap up our session today and our conversation today with one last possibility or angle that's sometimes possible, and I think is hinted at towards the end of the Haggadah in the Korech, the part where we make a sandwich of matzah and bitter herbs. And I want to say that I'm indebted for this interpretation to my friend Rabbanit Ann Gordon, who was one of my partners in creating a new Haggadah on the path to redemption that's coming out this year, and she wrote about it in the Haggadah. And she pointed out that there's something odd in the fact that in that part of the Seder, we eat a sandwich of matzah and bitter herbs, even though immediately before that, we already ate a significant amount of matzah, finished it, and ate a significant amount of bitter herbs and finished it. In our family Seder, that's the part where you get impatient. You're like, can we move on? And we're like, no, we're still eating. So we ate the matzah separately, we ate the bitter herbs separately, and now we eat a sandwich. Why do we need all of that? Now, what the text says is very simple. The text says, זכר למקדש כהלל, כן עשה הלל בזמן שבית המקדש היה קיים, היה כורך מצה ומרור ואוכל ביחד, לקיים מה שנאמר, על מצות ומרורים יאכלו. This is what Hillel used to do when the temple existed. He took the verse from Numbers that says, you shall eat it, namely the Pesach sacrifice, on matzot and maror, and he said it means that you have to eat them together. Now, what the text here doesn't say, but what lies behind it, is that there was a machloket, a deep disagreement between the majority of the rabbis, the sages, and Hillel. The majority of the rabbis thought, no, the way to properly understand this verse from Numbers is you eat the matzot and you eat the merorim separately. And if you don't do it this way, it doesn't count. You didn't do the commandment. Hillel said, no, You have to eat it together. That's what it means. The verse means you eat it together. And if you don't do it, it doesn't count. And the compilers of the Haggadah, instead of making a ruling and choosing one side of this disagreement over the other, said, let's do both. So we first eat the matzah and the herbs separately, then we eat them together. And this way we make room at the Seder table itself for differences of opinion. And my hope is that as we move forward with Seder preparation, but also with our national project, both here in Israel and as a people spread around the world and yet united, we're able to, as much as possible, make room for all the different kinds of Jews, for all the different kinds of Israeli, for all the different opinions that I hope, I believe, following your example, can indeed make us stronger.
Well, I promise to be more tolerant at our next Seder, to you guys eating herbs and matzah together and separately. But what I do enjoy in our Seder, that there are many different opinions, and every year these opinions are enriched with what was said in the previous year. So, like, there is more and more understanding among the people who disagree. So let's hope that it will be happening every year.
And let's hope that it happens not only on the individual familial level, but also on the national level. Thank you so much for being with us today and discussing the Seder and all the ways we can create our community and strengthen it, even and maybe because we disagree and bring different opinions to the table. And thank you, Abba.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.